welcome to Colledge Facebook Live, a series dedicated to bringing parents and families better information about higher education and better access to college admissions. I'm Jenny Umhofer. We are thrilled to welcome you tonight as we discuss the importance of the college essay. With admissions veteran Laurie Callaway, Assistant Director of Admission for University of Colorado at Boulder. Colledge is a private college consulting company. We are a team of experienced college admissions professionals that work closely with students and families anywhere on their path to higher education. And our work helps students identify and apply to best fit colleges and ignite the deeper potential in high school students. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our panelists to join the stream. I want to introduce Kelsey Tarosian, our admissions manager at Colledge and host tonight.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
Thanks, Kelsey. And next, I'd like to introduce Laurie Callaway, Assistant Director of Admission for CU Boulder.
Welcome. Hi, all. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Before I get started, Laurie, I would love to give you a chance to just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do.
Yeah, thanks so much. Again, thank you for having me. I love talking about the college essay, so thank you for this opportunity. I'm Laurie. I am an Assistant Director of Admissions with the University of Colorado Boulder. I am what's called a regionally based admissions counselor, so that means that I live and work in the territory I manage, Southern California, and I work with that territory and those students exclusively for CU Boulder. I am both sort of a medium-term admission counselor, 6-7 years, but I'm also someone who comes from a family of admissions counseling, or as we put it in the business, the other side of the desk. So my father was a counselor for students looking to go to college from New York City high schools. And so I grew up in an environment where college was exciting and had a lot of potential for change and had feeling of almost like unlimited options. So that's why ever since I was little, I always wanted to work as a college admission counselor, and I've done so starting in my mid-20s with the the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, based in Collegeville, Minnesota, and I worked for them for about 3 years. And then I worked with St. Louis University for about 2 years, and I have always worked with Southern Californians, but this is my first position at CU Boulder, where I'm only working with someone from Southern California. I'm a member of a group called RAC, which is a group of regionally based admission counselors. There's like over 150 of us here. And I'm also a member of WACAC, which is an affiliate of the national governing body for the college admissions world. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Laurie. I'm really excited about our conversation, and I want to thank anybody watching also for joining us tonight. Before we get started, I want to encourage everybody to pop any questions that you may have during the course of this discussion into the comments box. If we can address them in the moment, we will. If not, we'll try to address as many as possible at the end. And if you're finding it useful, go ahead and hit that like button so that we know that you're finding the information we're giving you useful. So last week, this has been a part of a series of, live discussions trying to bring better information, better access to students everywhere, especially in the wake of the pandemic. Last week, we hosted a lively conversation about leadership and diversity in higher education with USC and Caltech admissions. We learned how leadership may appear differently in college applications than it did in past years. The thing is, there's just so much change surrounding us that it's bound to affect the application process in 2021. So as we are asking all of our students to start writing and actually use their summer for writing, we thought that it would be really useful to sit down with Laurie and get her perspective on the college essay, ask her about how this part of the application might look a little differently this year. I mean, let's face it, sitting down to write college application essays pre-pandemic was pretty challenging. It was challenging enough already. And I'm guessing with significant test optional movement, crafting and submitting these compelling essays is probably going to be even more crucial than ever. But Laurie, before we jump into essays, I would really love to hear a little bit from you about your school. University of Colorado Boulder, awesome, is one of those unique schools that I see as able to meet so many different types of students, different types of human beings, exactly where they are. And I'm really curious to hear from your perspective, how is Boulder able to do that so well?
Yeah, so the University of Colorado Boulder, I think its strength is first started in its relationship with Colorado. We are the first public college in the state of Colorado. We've created the public college system. We are also about 3 months older than the state itself. So
Wow.
being the so we founded Boulder, the city, Boulder, the college, and just not predated the existence of the territory of Colorado, but made it in right before it became a state. As Colorado has grown and evolved, its industries, its cultures, its opportunities, and its peoples, we have grown and evolved because we're the flagship school for the state.
Wow.
And so we are a mission-driven school. We're a public Tier 1 AAU belonging research university with an average class size of 24 and a student-to-teacher ratio of 18:1, because we want to provide the premier education in the state for students who are looking for public education and also access to what we have to offer. Mm-hmm. So the reason why we don't have sort of a status quo student is because that would be impossible to do if you're looking to represent your state and your nation and in part the world. You have to make space for all different types of people to create an environment where they learn and grow from each other. So what we're prioritizing in the way we have our culture, like what a professor would just feel really comfortable allowing you to do, to the different interdisciplinary programs, to the multiplicity of interests in different types of populations on campus, is reflecting that and offering the best of that, which is what could come from an environment with people who are all passionate to be there, love the school. It is a, college town, and we do have football and basketball, but who all can find themselves represented there, even if they might necessarily be in common with every single person there.
Wow, that's really unique. And I like how your view of that is so tied in with the schools and the state's history. And it seems like you have, as a school, taken on such ownership of kind of the responsibility of being that flagship institution and being so well established within the city and within the state. So as a dedicated, career admissions officer, would you share a little bit about kind of common traits you've noticed among students who thrive at Boulder and what therefore you're really looking for in an admissions process?
Yeah, I would love to. So the thing about all of what I just described is, there's a lot of opportunity. If you ever get a mailer from us, it's going to have on the front, be Boulder. And other than, that phrase, I'm so glad it lines up like that. But what it really means is think beyond what you think is necessarily possible for what you want to do for college. But what you have to do that is be someone who's willing to sort of raise the hand or step the toe out and say, I'm going to take advantage of this first initial opportunity. Anything, connecting with a residence hall advisor, taking an honors level course, going to your department for office hours, taking the hand and taking that opportunity. So any type of student can do that in terms of an introverted student or an extroverted student or a sciences or maths or humanities student. There is just tends to be sort of a curiosity and a willingness to be like, well, could we? Do you know if that our student body tends to have in common? They bring it to a multiplicity of different interests, and sometimes they'll meet each other and be like, wow, I didn't know we had that, but they're all thinking, well, okay, let me think if I could. And they're taking that first step and taking us up on opportunity. Once they do that, systems fall into place, people step up to assist them and work with them, but they sort of have to pop their head up or put their hand out and then just be like, well, and that tends to be something that is in common. So you can demonstrate that in many ways in the application. We read holistically. So I'm looking at every part. I'm looking basically, not comparing you to sort of the status quo student model that I have in my mind, but I'm looking at of what I could see you had the chances to do. What did you choose to do? How did you take advantage of opportunity? What is that narrative for who you see yourself as? How did you do with those choices? Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking at it more like that.
Sounds like a very interesting perspective from which to read. And I think, it sounds like fun. And it sounds also like, it's really, like you said, it's the students who can show you that they're willing to take that first step and reach a little bit out of maybe their comfort zone to try something new or get help that really thrive. Okay, so let's get down to essays. I know that's what we're supposed to be talking about here. So Boulder, to apply to Boulder, you have to apply through Common App. They require that main 650 word essay that's on a choice of 6 different topics. I know with me, oftentimes when I work with a student, I find that there's 2 major pieces to the process that kind of gets in their way. The first one is kind of revealing or uncovering the content that they have within them and understanding that that's content of value and what is content of value. And then the second piece is the editing process, editing well and clearly so that their message, whatever it is that they're trying to show about themselves or reflect or whatever it is, comes across as clearly as possible in that personal statement. But I would love to hear where you really notice students shining and showing themselves to be amazing in that big Common App personal statement.
Yeah, so whenever I get this question from students, I kind of back up with them a little bit. And I was like, okay, the personal statement, and undoubtedly important, probably the thing I get the most questions about from students, but let's figure out where it falls within the entire application and why we're doing this statement. So yeah, like, why are we doing this? Because you can't do something well unless you know exactly what you're doing it for or why. So if you back up a little bit, you're thinking, if I'm using the Common Application, I'm applying to schools that use a holistic process. What I'm trying to show them is why I look at these communities and see my place in any of those communities. So the application's purpose is to bring me to that conclusion. As someone who knows my community deeply, if I read your application, as I walk through it, I can see, yeah, I get why I see you here. And so the personal statement is part of that. But what I see students who first handle that most successfully is they think about every part of their application and how it works together as a cohesive piece. You'll hear narrative story, but what that means is looking at each part of your application as a cohesive piece. What is the narrative that you start to reveal as you read through it? Imagine if you weren't you when you were doing that. So your personal essay or personal statement is the written part where you get to guide us, like the most, sorry for being punny, but narrative part of really almost telling us like, this is why this matches, giving us something to interpret everything else through or by or get the why of your choices.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really where I would advise you to start and take pressure off of sort of a hierarchy of experiences. I have to have this cool thing or this outstanding thing or this horrible thing in order to have something compelling. We work with 17 and 18-year-olds as first-time applicants because we like you and we enjoy this working with people this age, and we find this type of community building compelling. So by revealing more and giving us more insight to like sort of what makes you tick and helping us learn that narrative, that's compelling enough for us.
Yeah. That's wonderful. It's wonderful advice. And I actually really like the idea as an exercise of having a student print out their entire Common Application and do almost a mock admissions review for themselves and figure out, kind of try to think about it 3 steps back and think like, what would I think about this person? What would I have taken away? What would I learn? So what I would say, any of you who are watching, if you're not working with somebody, if you don't have that help, that might be a really wonderful thing for you to try. Maybe enlist the help of, a friend and get their eyes on your application and get that perspective of what is the story that I'm telling here with my entire piece, with all of my grades and all of my test scores, if I'm submitting them, depending on the school, and my activities. And, obviously you don't know the letters of recommendation, but they're all different pieces of the same package. Okay, so
I just wanted to follow up on that because I didn't think about this from a resource perspective, but anyone watching this, I'd love to direct you to regionalcounselors.com. That's where the regional nonprofit organization I belong to, anyone who is a regional counselor like myself, we're doing webinars twice a month on everything from choosing your college list to understanding holistic admissions to maybe we're looking at in the fall doing a mock case study possibly, or in the spring. So if you're looking for sort of online resources, there is that webinar series through the Regional Counselors of California at regionalcounselors.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Laurie. So back to writing a little bit. The other thing I really love, one of my favorite things is to read College's supplemental questions. And Boulder has a truly great one. So I'm going to read it to everybody so that you hear what it is. So you have, first of all, this is unusual. You have required writing supplement that gives you 250 to 650 words. First of all, it's a really big range. It's not something you see in a lot of supplements. And second of all, that's a big supplement that you can write up to 650 words. Usually I see supplements more often averaging 250 to 350 words. So just to give you some context. So here it is. At the University of Colorado Boulder, no two buffs are alike. We value difference and support equity and inclusion of all students and their many intersecting identities. Pick one of your unique identities and describe its significance. And I have to say, I love this supplement because even more so than a lot of supplements, it shows so much about the school. I can see just from reading this question that Boulder has this deep value on individuality, on the ability to self-reflect. But I would love to hear from your side, what is it that you want to see in this supplemental?
Yeah. So first, I have to give kudos to my coworkers in the office. This question came out right as I was starting in the Office of Admission at Boulder. And I know that some of our office put together a ton of work and thought on that, hoping to get to just that point. So shout out to them. But also what we're trying to learn more about is, again, I mentioned sort of the status quo student. You're not going to be able to figure out, if you're writing the Boulder Supplemental, what we want to see, because we don't have priorities for what we want to see. Now, that doesn't mean we would like it to be badly spelled or incorrect grammar. Let's not go that far. But yeah, no. Someone will write me that essay in a supplement. You said I could do this, so I have to compare. So, but what we're looking for is for you to take us deeper into an understanding of yourself and why. And you don't have to make that connection. And this is why I'd be great at Boulder. But I, again, know my community. I know the school. So I would love to learn more about you through the supplemental, what you value, what is something that impacts the way you see the world or interact with the world, so that I can get a sense of how we could support you in our community and how you would interact with the community. So again, what we're really hoping to see is, again, take us on that journey with you. Give me more of an understanding of yourself, but it's a little bit different than the personal essay statement for the Common App, because you can be more directed to like what you value about us. Again, not saying this is what I value, but you can give us a chance to see why you would value something that we have to offer. Is
that why piece really important here?
Yes, it really is. From the beginning, I'm trying to really convey the sort of like dynamic, interactive feeling that I get on campus. Like before I came to work at Boulder, I was like a ride or die, small colleges, liberal arts, a girl all the way through employee. And I have a big family, so not everyone in my family was, but I would never understand before I worked at Boulder why a student would look at that larger experience. And one of the reasons why I think the why I love working here and the why it's so important to us is because we don't have like a plug and play community. Like, this is what I get. This is what a student of my major and type does, you know? And so that why is how we have that understanding of like, we have the opportunity, we have the research opportunities, we have the majors, we have the communities. What would you do? Why would you do what you would do?
Why would you do it?
Yeah, why would you do it? And that's what we can really like make the connection and see.
Interesting. Can you give us a couple of examples? Maybe start with an example of a response to the Boulder Supplemental that missed the mark.
Yeah, so I was, there's one that I thought would be a really good one just because it started off as something that seemed very important to the student. The student was a skater, and you know, I was 15 when Skater Boy came out by Avril Lavigne, and I was like instantly, I may really be partial to this one. I like it, you know, but I think this student fell into the pitfall that a lot of students fall into, which is it's really hard, and this is regardless of age, but this is sort of usually the first time we're asking you to do this. It's really hard to reflect on yourself as a person at any time in your life. It's really hard even to write like a short professional bio. So what we reach for is markers or things to describe and sort of by inference, describe what is valuable to us. So like you're gonna tell me something about like the build of the skateboard, and I'm gonna learn about the wheels, and I'm learning about the finish, and I'm learning about maybe a little history, which I love history, but I have no idea. I know what the student values. I know facts about it, but again, don't have any of the why. And I was getting descriptions of the student's identity, like time spent, interactions with friends, you know, taking me sort of the journey of a skater, but like I have no idea really, other than, the student says, reason for doing this, reason for passion. But like,
Yeah.
you can't state a reason for passion. You have to bring somebody there and like let them know really why it's passionate for you.
Yeah.
So I would say that had a great structure and had a lot of opportunity, but I think it's just hard maybe in the first several drafts or without at least someone else to read it to like really truly know that you're taking that step and reflecting more on your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good example. Do you have any and maybe two different examples of Boulder supplementals that actually did really well?
Yeah, for myself, I can. In terms of one supplemental that did really well, I had a student who was writing about the way freeways and the freeway system in LA relates to their life. And not in terms of like all the freeways in LA, no, but there's like in terms of how like where this specific student lived in Northeast LA and sort of the alcove created by the freeway and the intersection. If you know anything about LA freeways, there's a lot of history and inequality wrapped up into the history of LA freeways. And so, again, it could have been like the skateboard essay, great history, tons of details to focus on, but we weren't really, it was like dash of that, dash of, just so you're not like, I'm totally oblivious of the stuff, but it really was taking into sort of, I was into the students' community because we were talking about 2 or 3 blocks, sort of where the freeway walls intersect and how it changes the community, how people function. And really what I learned is what this person loved in their daily life community, like what they give to the people around them, what they value and take from the people around them. And it was more of like describing it through, this causes this effect. But I was really learning about like who this person was in community. And both of those examples, both those things are setups, like this is the premise by which I will get into deeper, but I think one took it there and one just didn't.
One did not.
That's specific. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's really helpful. And actually, speaking of Los Angeles and California, I know that we have a lot of students over here that are interested in Boulder. It seems like far enough away, but still pretty close, still like somewhat accessible. And I'm wondering, as one of the Los Angeles area regionals, if you can talk a little bit about like how to not navigate, how to see, like, if you see anything coming from California students specifically in their writing, positive or negative, like maybe they're repurposing, for example, their UC essays, and that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm wondering if there's any trends you see specifically from California students.
Specifically in the supplemental or more so in both parts of the
I think either way, but I'm thinking about the supplemental only because everybody ends up writing the kind of the Common App for a lot of different schools. So I think I'm thinking mainly about the supplemental.
Yeah. So I'm not so much seeing like a word for word repurposing of a UC essay, but I think I see the way that the UCs require you to write in the short answers. They're a specific type of writing. They're also really exciting to write for if you're like an essay person like me, because it's a whole different type of challenge. It's a different type of challenge. It's much more direct and straightforward. And the supplemental is asking us for sort of like, I guess the best way to describe this is almost like think about it in terms of like a body system. Like the UC essays are like the bones. Those are like direct, straight to the point there. And we're more of like the ligaments, we want to get into it. So if there's a tonality that I like having reading these a lot. There's a tonality that sometimes I'm like, I think the mental switch of like being like, okay, different tonality, different sort of prioritization. But that would be really only that. And to be honest, the beach, y'all. I get a lot of essays describing in relationship to the beach when I worked at St. Ben's and St. John's. They're like the winningest college football program across all divisions all the time. I used to get tons of football essays. Think about it in context. A lot of people will think of us for snowboarding because the mountain's right there. So people will talk about the beach. Think about that, little bits like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's a great little insight there. Thank you. And then a couple more questions about essays. Do you have any advice for students on how to navigate the common application main personal statement versus the supplemental and how you approach that? Because I could see a student writing one first and then getting a little stuck on the other if they overlap too much?
Definitely. Well, the first step to avoiding that is really focusing on what is the bigger priority. And the bigger priority first is your overall applications, because I'm pretty sure you're not just applying to one school in the Common Application.
Right.
So because that is where most students are starting, it is better to really think about your personal statement, again, in what I said before, that narrative, like a thought approach, but think about it, how it would connect with all of those schools that are receiving it.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to show something, or give us all of those schools an understanding of how they could serve you or how you would fit. After you write that, that's written. That should be your first priority, because that's going to help you apply to many more schools. After you write that, though, you know what you've written.
Right.
So you can then look at our supplemental and be like, okay, so if I'm not going to copy my personal essay, how could I give them an insight into my identity? And identity is multifaceted. You could be like a cookie baker, and that could be like something deep and important to you. How can I show them a part of my identity that explains how I interact with the world and what I value? Yeah.
Wonderful. That's such helpful advice. So I want to just back out of essays a little bit and talk a little bit about the whole application. You've given us a little bit of light on what, kind of your reading process. And I'm thinking back to my most recent reading experience. And I know that there were always those applications that got me internally, or sometimes externally, jumping up and down with excitement. The student has to come to this school. It's really perfect. Can you share an example of an application that you remember being that for you? What was it about the student or the application that got you so excited?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of an application. The central essay was about the student who transferred in junior year, which is pretty hard to do in high school with everything set. Their essay was about basically their process of coming up with the perfect, I mentioned baking before, perfect chocolate chip cookie recipe. The reason why is the student was actually selling chocolate chip cookies in their school, and as they learned their school community, they refine the recipe, yeah, to get it right for their school and to really appeal. But each part of this application was done with that sort of overall cohesive approach. So it wasn't because I was like, this is the Boulder student, because again, this is a very well done essay, and now I could see so many possibilities for this student. And you could also tell there was care went into the essay. The student didn't sort of push themselves to the point where they're like, I've got to write about the most intense thing ever. They really thought about it, like, what is something that shows how I operate in the world, and structured their application around that. And so, the dip in sophomore year leading into junior year, it was less concerning for me because I had a better understanding of how a student responds to such a challenging situation as coming into a new school halfway through and developing. So I was like, okay, I think that I'm not going to see the student repeat that dip in first year because they've experienced something like that in a greater degree. So the whole application really spoke to the weaknesses in the application in a way that convinced me that this would be a good idea. And then the essay was just charming and sweet and great. And I was like, I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to talk a tiny bit. We're running out of time, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. But if you bear with us, we'll want to give some room for questions. We have we just have one more talking point that we want to touch, which is holistic review. Laurie has already touched on this a little bit, but holistic review is something that you're going to hear a lot about right now. It's really being discussed because so many schools are going test optimal. So people are wondering, how are they going to know who to admit if they don't have standardized test scores and possibly standard transcripts in light of the pandemic? So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, holistic review describes the process by which admissions officers aim to look at the whole student as represented by every single part of the application packet. As they read, they kind of paint a picture in their minds of who a student might be. And they recognize that students are more than just that GPA or their test scores. As a reader, it means looking at each part of the application contextually rather than as separate parts. Just like Laurie was describing in the previous example of the student who wrote the baking essay, that you could already understand what happened in between sophomore and junior year. in terms of her grade. So Laurie, if you could share just a little bit about how that process works for you, reading such an incredibly large body of applicants.
So we read every single application that we read. Boulder does. We receive assistance from specialty trained readers that work with us, and the territory managers, so an admission counselor, we're fully responsible for the decisions that go out through the year, and we make sure that we know what decisions are going out before they go out. But that said, my focus is really, like, I think for us at the most important application of holistic review, I focus and I read primarily students who are not academically like immediately admissible for further consideration for the program. So just if your academics meet our profile, it doesn't mean that we'll immediately admit you. It means that the college is probably going to then immediately look at your application, or you'll proceed faster down the path. For students who there is more of a question, those are the applications that we as a territory managers focus on first, because we have the best context into these students' lived environments. We work in the territories. We are most familiar with the school. We have the resources to reach out if we have questions. So when I'm reading that application holistically, I always have the mindset of really looking to get the full picture, looking at every single part of the application, because we're not reading to deny. We're not one of those schools that is like, we're going to cut you out as fast as we can. You know, we're really thinking, okay, maybe not to the program you applied to, but is there space for you, and could you build a pathway to it? Could we work with you on this option, and would you be good for that program? And so we're trying to look at that. But in my application, especially, I'm really looking at everything: the GPA trend, the additional information section, the recommendations, the resume, if you submit everything. I'm really reading it to like diligently build that full picture.
It sounds like, and tell me if I'm wrong, it sounds like for the students who are kind of a little bit on the margin, on the cusp or below that, each part of the application, and especially that self-representation piece, almost counts more, is almost more important, because you want to contextualize any dips that you may see academically. Would you say that that's accurate?
I would say nothing for us to plant the overall question of like academic fitness. We have to make sure that if we're putting you in our classrooms, you're going to thrive in that first year, because if not, we're doing you a serious disservice. But I would say, especially in that first review, when we're really thinking, can we continue this application down the pathway, it does matter for us, I think, a little bit more, just so that we can, we're hoping to get a guess that question, so we're like digging through and like, come on, let's find it. Let's figure out like why this would be still a good idea to look at more, because what we're doing when we are admitting, we're not admitting individual by individual, we're building an entire community. So we're trying to move students further down the pathway so that when we get to that final stage of like being like, okay, who's going to be in the community, you have the chance to be there, and you know, still be considered in that. So helping us really see that if your application is more on the cusp, like that's going to really assist you, whereby a student who's like all above our numbers, maybe they're like, okay, well, let's think about them in terms of the school. They're still going to be looked at beyond their academics,
of course.
But maybe they'll move one step ahead a little bit earlier.
That makes sense. Thank you so much for answering that. And I'm wondering if you only had one piece of advice to give to all of the rising seniors out there regarding their essays and their applications, what would that piece of advice be?
You're going to go to college.
There you go.
You're going to go to college. And one other, over 50% of schools in the U.S. accept over 50% of their applicants, and they're really great schools. So
that is amazing.
You're going to go to college.
That's awesome. That's a fantastic data point, and thank you for that message, Laurie. So I want to welcome Jenny back, and we're going to kind of start to close up. Thank you so much. Hi, Jenny.
Hi. It's just so inspiring to hear you talk, Laurie. Thank you so much for your time. I'm especially heartened to hear, some of your, statements about we're looking for reasons to admit, and, even just for students and parents to hear that over 50% of the colleges and universities, are really going to be accessible, because that's really the name of the game, is access. And we hope that students and families that are listening can really find their way to better access for higher education, if that is their part of their life goal. But thank you so much for being with us. Kelsey, did you want to say anything else before?
Yeah, no, I want to echo your sentiments, Jenny. I want to thank you again, Laurie. And, as a group that's really just trying to reach as many families, as many students as we can, to provide more information, better access to college, better access to college admissions. It means so much to us that you were able to join, and you gave so much information. You really packed it in there, and I appreciate it so much. So thank you. And
I appreciate this opportunity so much. Thank you.
I hopefully we'll do it again sometime soon. I also want to let anybody watching know that if you feel like you need more information, and no one would blame you if you did, there are a lot of colleges out there. I mean, way upwards of 2,000 schools for undergraduates alone. I wouldn't blame you if you needed more information, but if you feel like you do, even if you just want to talk, the first step with us, no matter what, is just a call for a free phone consultation. We would be more than happy to talk to you about specific circumstances, give you information and thoughts about what to think about. And even just what to think about can be hugely helpful. Just like knowing that last piece of advice from Laurie, that 50% of colleges in the nation accept 50%, over 50% of students, is huge. And that really changes your perspective. We just want to help as many people as we can. So if after that phone consultation you want more help, great. If not, great. And I'm sure that Laurie also, as a regional admissions officer, would be happy for you to reach out to her if you're interested in her school as well. So, there's no barriers here. So I just want to encourage anybody watching to reach out if you need anything. And if this has been useful for you, or you think that it might be useful for a friend, or some of our previous recordings might be useful for a friend, please reach out. You can send us a message on Facebook or look up our email addresses and email us. I would be more than happy to send recordings of this. The whole purpose is to reach people and to help. So thank you everybody so much for joining tonight. Thank you, Jenny, for facilitating. Thank you, Laurie, for joining us. And I think we're gonna sign off.
Thanks, guys. Have a great 4th. Bye.